Welcome to episode 6 of Craftish, a podcast of conversations about craft-ish. The real focus is on the stories behind the craft, the journeys that lead knitwear designers, filmmakers, artists, quilters, writers, or anyone on a creative path to where they are today and where they're headed to next. I'm your host, Vickie Howell. This episode is sponsored by Brooklyn Craft Company, a craft studio and DIY classroom for the modern maker. They offer workshops including sewing, dyeing, knitting, jewelry, art, paper crafts, pretty much anything cool you'd want to learn. Plus, they throw epic craft parties. For more information, go to brooklyncraftcompany.com. On today's episode, we're hearing from Ed Roth. Ed is a street artist, entrepreneur, and the founder of the wildly popular stencil company, Stencil1. He's kind of been the veritable gateway drug of crafting, too, for many who would have never considered it an interesting pursuit otherwise. His designs cross a unique combination of street, nature, and pop culture. His stencils are in retailers nationwide, and he's collaborated with brands ranging from Converse to the Ace Hotel in Manhattan. I'm pretty sure, too, that he's one of the few, if not the only person, to be both praised by the domestic Queen Martha Stewart and compared to the infamous artist Banksy. He's also my dear friend. So I'm thrilled to introduce him to you now. Ed Roth, thank you so much for being on Craftish.
Oh, Vickie, I'm thrilled. Thank you.
I wanted to start with something that you say at the beginning of one of your books, Stencil 201. You mention stenciling is an stenciling is an art form that transcends social and economic barriers. And to me, that spoke to something that's really important to me, which is making craft and art accessible to everyone. Is that something that you gave thought to when starting your company Stencil1 or when creating stencils sort of for the masses?
I don't think I thought about releasing something. I don't think I put thought. I think it was naturally in me to do something affordable because it's just the way I grew up and how I think. So that's just in me. Mm-hmm. But I'm glad that, the afterthought of what I made, I'm like, well, why do I like stencils? And I'm like, well, it empowers people who can't just draw anything. And also, it is affordable. If you can cut out a simple image on a thick piece of paper, you can create that motif over and over. And then if I provide them a tool that's pretty affordable, I can spread artwork in an affordable manner. Somebody doesn't have to go buy tons of supplies and other tools that might cost more money. So I didn't think of it directly to start. It just was how I think. I'm a frugal thinker, I believe.
Did you have a background in web design. Was that a direct translation for you for moving into sort of the stencil realm?
Let's see. I started in graphic design at a small graphic design house in Soho, in New York. And then I moved into web design. And then the jump to, stencils were a hobby when I was a teenager. So I did learn a lot of digital skills in the web design world, including having to create illustrations for websites. So, and just the discipline of working in web design companies, and I worked at a lot of TV production houses. I did motion graphics for commercials, movies. I think all those skills brought me back to my hobby and helped me perfect it and make it a business, because I learned to be a little more disciplined and business strong by working in those corporate worlds. So I hope that answers that question of the transition from one to the other. It was helpful.
Well, I just wonder, because a lot of graphic design is so sort of iconic, or iconographic rather. And so in that way, I wonder if it would it seems like it would translate. I wonder if you went back to any of the things that you had created graphically for work and sort of riffed with them to then create a stencil, not necessarily for your business, but just if there was a pathway there at all.
I love that question. It makes me think about a saying, because I used to do a lot of logo design in the web design world if we were doing somebody's full identity makeover. And they would say, a good logo can be drawn in the sand. And I love that. Yeah. And so when I see a busy logo, I just want to scream. And a stencil can always be drawn in the sand because it's all like little parts so I think a lot of people have said to me, I like your designs because they're flat and simple and I can take them and do what I want with them. So I think something about always going back to simplicity in design does carry over into my new world of stencils. So that's a thought-provoking one for me to think about. I like that.
Well, I think also that speaks to, I know we both sort of teach and we work in, at conferences sometimes or just within our community. And people are so fearful of creativity or often have feelings of being lesser than and just there's such a block there because of, I don't know, maybe because, creativity isn't, sort of embedded in us in art programs anymore, or maybe it's just, the fear of rejection. But I feel like when you can sort of make it black and white, both literally and figuratively for people, and that's something that stenciling can really do. If you can take out all of the busyness that might happen for something that requires a ton of shading or several levels of technique, and you can really show beauty and simplicity, it opens up sort of a kind of a joyous world to someone who may not have considered themselves creative before then.
I would agree. I think it's less intimidating to see one simple stencil image and there's really one step. Very few steps. You're placing it down on your surface and you're painting into the open areas with a certain technique. But I've still seen people freeze up at my events and teaching. Like they're like, I don't want to screw this up.
Yeah.
But then when they learn that it's not hard, I see that them flow. So it's just that initial thing to get over, and at least this is the gateway drug to crafting is.
I'm pretty sure I coined that term for you on a Facebook or on an Amazon review. I'm pretty sure
maybe that's sort of getting. But yeah, it's like it's easy enough to if you just get in there. So. Because you're right. It goes back to that like simple. Okay, it's just one icon. It's just some open shapes. Let me try this.
Actually, I think it was in the intro to Craftcore, my book that I interviewed you for, and I called you the gateway drug to getting dudes to be crafty or creative in general.
I always love that you mentioned to me and in there that guys and your son was drawn to the stencils. My firefighter brother, who would never call himself crafty, but totally is. He because of the craft maybe itself, but really because of the images that you have created. I think that it sort of transcends sort of the traditional aspect or maybe the stereotypical aspect of what, using a stipple brush might have been construed as before. Your graphics tend to be sort of an interesting mix of pop culture, wilderness, and street art. Are these images something that when you were starting that you wanted to see and didn't see, or are they just a direct translation of what your life experience is? Can you speak to that a bit? Yeah, and thank you for what you've said. I I've created what I like, and definitely, I guess it's life experiences because here I am in Brooklyn and I see water towers and well, back in the day you saw boom boxes and I love that street aesthetic and I love stencil graffiti, which uh, that greatly inspires me. And I thought, well, these iconic images are going to make their way onto clothing, and why can't they make their way onto other things like why can't you put a boombox repeat on your walls in your house? And we're talking 11 years ago when I was thinking like let's I was seeing a transition from street artists becoming gallery artists, and then I thought, well, what is wrong with them being decorative artists too? And so my imagery are all things I like. I go upstate here in New York a lot, and I love nature. I love patterns in like vintage tiles. So I love home decor,
Mm-hmm.
but I also love the pop culture. Imagery and a lot of eclectic stuff too. So I just want to make what I like, but of course, as a business, I have to make what other people will like too, and will of course sell. So sometimes but luckily, if I'm going to make something like flowers, I do love flowers, and
Mm-hmm.
how can I make the most beautiful flower I like? Because a lot of people are buying my flower designs, so I'm going to make. What flowers do I like in design? Well, I like Japanese textiles, and I'll look at vintage kimonos and beautiful motifs on them, and say, "Oh, look at these mums." So now I have a whole bunch of mums I just love, and it seems people like them too. So
That seems like such a dance because a flower in and of itself is very much a traditional crafty motif.
Yes.
And the inception of your stencil career was really on the antithesis of that, right? You're trying to do street art, but you're a businessman also.
Right.
So finding that balance of, I guess, just sort of like the graphic aspect or maybe the vintage or the kitsch or whatever that makes it still true to you while still fulfilling the sort of creative entrepreneurial
Mm-hmm.
side must be challenging.
It's interesting. I look at mums, like back to the mum example, floral, and that is, you're right. Like if you went back into the archives of stencils in the 70s or 80s, you'll see some flower stuff. And I'm like, well, I'll make the most tasteful flower that works for me. And it also comes down to, for two things. It comes down to, for me, the design and making it as beautiful as I can make it, and also the projects. I love, as you said, we both teach. And when I show projects on the blog and do teaching, well, I'll bring my bicycle stencils with the mums, and the bicycle wheels are circular and the mums are circular, and I'll mix those together. Or I'll paint on dark blue indigo dyed material with white mums to get the feeling of where I got my inspiration for the Japanese textiles. So I'll try to be inspiring to people by doing the most, the prettiest stuff I could do. But if they want to take the mum and, do their own thing with it, then that's great too. So
it kind of makes me, when you're describing this, I'm seeing kind of like a cool old vintage bicycle that you might find at a thrift store that somebody then turns into this like cool planter in their backyard. It's like it's utilizing materials in an unexpected way.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of a gift creatively to give to a student or a follower or a consumer, because it is so ingrained in us to think of things within these lines, and just by definition, being creative is the opposite.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, yes.
During, you also mention in one of your books that something that's actually become an unwitting theme of this podcast, and you call it the great give and take, and it's something I wanted to talk a little bit about, and it's that surprise as an artist, a crafter, a creative entrepreneur, whatever, however you like to define yourself, of how inspired that you become by what the people are making who were inspired by your products or craft.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Can you speak a little to that, what that feels like and how that inspires you creatively?
Yeah, absolutely. It is a great give and take. I create a simple, sorry, there's some sound outside.
Well, you do live in New York.
Yeah. I create a simple, iconic stencil image, and when I put that out there and I see how people, I create that digitally. It gets cut with a laser, so it's very, it's a computer. It's not the warmest process, and there's no people involved. And then when I release that out, I get to paint with it, which is giving me my own satisfaction, and then I get to be tactile. But the bigger gift is when I see what people have made. My customers will send me image. We always say, please send us images of what you've made, and I have, people's talents are just incredible. We're just providing a simple tool, and to see people's choice of surface and what they've created using the stencil, things I've never thought of. Of course, like somebody will paint something on a wall, but
yeah,
even that, I got an email the other day from a customer, and she just wanted more of a backdrop to these plates that she wanted to hang on her wall. And the plates were obscure. They were like scenes of like woodsy cottages. They were really cool. And then she put all these metallic or shiny mums behind it that were almost the same color as the wall. The layering was just so genius. I was like, oh, I wouldn't have thought to do that. And I've had customers paint their Uggs, paint sweaters, which are, difficult to paint wool and stuff. A toilet, the back of a toilet with a little deer. They did like a woodsy lodge theme in this bathroom.
I mean, that just makes sense though, really. That's a perfect flat surface.
right. But, again, that challenge of porcelain, I was like, okay, go for it. There's such a reward in seeing art, perpetuating art. People are creative,
And that's that give and take that you're speaking of that I love so much, because when I was talking to Rachel Herron, who's she's a best-selling novelist, and she was talking about how we were talking about the feeling of people, appreciating your work, and she shared a story about a woman who had been really affected by her work and had read it like during a hospital visit and that type of thing. And she was talking about how rewarding that was and how the woman showed such great appreciation. And we were talking about, but she's still feeding Rachel at the same thing, like that love and appreciation then feeds Rachel again to be able to create more. And it sounds like it's the same thing from, that's a writer, but from an artist perspective, they come to you, seeking this inspiration, and probably completely, never expect that they're then inspiring the artist.
Right. Yeah, I don't think they're thinking that, but they definitely are. You're right. It's very, it is feeding my soul and pushing me. One woman came up to me at a trade show, and I had my books there, and she said, I have your first book, and I work with inmates at a prison, and she's like, they come to me. It's like art therapy is what she teaches, and she said they really won't open up and chat with her much, but then she brings out the book and they start painting together, and she's like, and then they start talking, and I I like, God, I can almost cry when I think of that story. I'm like, the power of art and loosening people up and empowering them. So it's definitely nurturing on, sometimes a very deep level.
I mean, you can sleep well at night with that story.
Yeah, that's true.
At what point, so you transitioned from, you at some point decided that you didn't want to work in the sort of corporate world.
Yeah.
And decided that you would sort of go out on your own. Did you know what that was going to look like at the time when you took this leap of faith? Did you sort of have a clear sort of entrepreneurial path, or did you take this total like artist abandon journey towards wherever wherever it was going to take you?
Right. It wasn't like jumping out of a plane without the parachute, and then whatever that saying is, build the parachute on your way down or something. Mm-hmm. Or maybe it was because I just did it as a project. I basically I quit a job, a corporate. Where was I? I was working at an ad agency, which I termed the Crucible. It was a very competitive place. I was like, everyone's accusing everyone else of being a witch. I just had it with the corporate stuff. So I had some money saved because that was a decent paying job. And I said, well, I was running a small art gallery with a friend in Brooklyn, and we were promoting a lot of street artists and we had these affordable art shows. Everything was always under $100. And I thought, it's funny to think that 10 years ago, there wasn't much web inspiration happening. Like if you wanted, we have Pinterest now and everything, but years ago, if you wanted inspiration, you'd go buy design books.
Yeah.
It's really weird to think that's only 10 years ago. So I would always be buying design books on stencil graffiti, books on design houses. Their portfolio would be in books. And I said, I want to put out a book. So that's what I did. I ventured into, let me just build this book, and then maybe this book will sell.
Were you planning on self-publishing at that point?
I didn't know. I was buying the different stencil graffiti books. So the first people I showed it to were publishers of those books. So I thought, I did my research, like, how much is self-publishing? How do you get something made? Oh, okay, these publishers make books for you.
Right.
I didn't know anything. So
how did you even get them to see your stuff at that point?
I called them up and I said, I have a new book that I made a prototype of. Can I show it to you? Can I come in? And they said, yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Like I called, I think it was Thames and Hudson and some other publishers. And I was like, and they said, this is a cool book. So I built a prototype book by scratch. I had 50 designs cut. I ripped apart a binder and used the metal clipping inside to hold the stencils. And I hand painted a cover out of cardstock. And I built this like super crafty DIY book. I still have the book. It's such a great thing to always look at and remember how I started this. I spray painted every single page in the book. So you'll see the stencil and then the next page is it applied, but I hand painted everything.
Yeah.
And they said, this is really cool, but this would be really expensive to make. And we've never made anything like this. So I was like, okay, what do I do now? I'm a web designer, so let me build a website and start selling the stencils and see how that goes. And it got press. It got written up on coolhunting.com, the stencil selling. And the New York Times called me after Cool Hunting, and they wanted to do a little story on it. And me never running a business and never making a product before, that really taught me the lesson of the importance of press.
Yeah.
Because then a store, Blick Art Materials, called and were like, we want to carry your stencils. And I said, oh, I just stuff them in envelopes from my house.
Yeah.
And so, it's really...
What were you making them out of at that point? That seems like a huge leap from a very punk rock book. That sounds awesome, and I want to see pictures of it.
Yeah.
To deciding that you're going to produce them and sell them on your site, which, by the way, at that point, there wasn't PayPal. There wasn't Etsy. So there's a lot more bells and whistles that you had to go through to set up shop.
Yeah.
Well,
actually, I did it when PayPal just started, and I heard about these PayPal buttons, and that's how I did it.
Really? Really? So you were on board from the beginning.
Yeah. Yeah. And the stencils were made of Mylar then, and they're Mylar now, and they were a different Mylar. But
were you hand cutting them at that point?
No, they were machine cut. So when I had started and I thought, oh, I want this to be a book, I had sourced a manufacturer who could make them in mass. So from the start, I outsourced, which has always been a question.
You don't hear that often. That's
exactly
great foresight.
Right. I mean, my own prototypes and my own hobby ones were hand cut or cut on a little cutter here, but I outsourced, and so that made my path a little easier. And Blick said, "Well, get your packaging together because we want to pick these up."
Wow.
And to go start off the bat with a big store wanting you was like, "Oh, I'm onto something." Like, you feel that reward. You feel acknowledged,
valued,
valued and validated. And then, just kept going. And then, of course, 2 years later, I'm at a dinner where there's some friends who worked at Chronicle Books, and they said, oh, wow, we should make a book of these stencils. And I was like, yes, that was the original. That was
You're like,
vision.
what a great idea.
Right. Yeah.
Man, how are you... If you don't mind me asking, how are you funding outsourcing at that point, at sort of like the beginning? Because that's usually, most artists are like, well, someday eventually I'm going to try and outsource. And at that time, now you could set up, I guess, a Kickstarter and get that. But at that point, were you just like bootstrapping it?
I was everything. All my career's been the bootstrap. And in that beginning, I designed 50 designs. And I had the 50 laser cut and shipped to me. There was a minimum quantity, but it wasn't much. I think I had to do like 10 or 20 of each. I think it was 20. And so that was my initial investment. Was I had those 50 designs cut, and they were on shelves in my house. Like, I bought some mail slots from Staples. Mm-hmm. And, each one was in its own little category. And then I'd be like, oh, I got 2 PayPal orders today. And I put those in a priority envelope and send them to those people. So it really wasn't a big investment. I think it probably cost me like $1,000 to get the first initial run, because there was programming fees.
Yeah.
But I had some money from that web design or ad agency job. So that was my start.
Your startup, yeah. Well, now, cut to however many years later, are you at 10, 12 years of being a company?
11 years.
11 years?
Yeah.
And you're in, I know that I've seen your stuff in craft stores. I've seen it in Aaron Brothers. I've seen them in like really unexpected places.
Yeah.
How, you spoke earlier about how your designs not changed, but it's been supplemented by a little bit more, traditional things like flowers and that sort of thing. At this point, when when your reach is so much further than it was, 11 years ago, how much of what the publishers say or what the, retailers say influences how you're designing now?
Oh, not much. I'm not, well, when I did a licensing deal and my product went into Michael's, the buyers apparently, and the people I licensed to was Plaid, they had some input, and the buyers seem to have a lot of input. But any other store I deal with has never ever said to me what I should design. We just have hundreds of choices now, so they pick what they think will do well, and I will also say to them, I'm selling, this certain design very well on my site, so I would suggest you pick it up. But we also, since we now have a distributor, and they carry all of our designs and distribute those to all the mom and pops. So I'm still not huge. I'm still not in those major craft stores on my own, except through like that licensing deal, because
it's hard. The real estate is hard. There's not the space. I mean, you almost have to go with the bigger people that already have shelf space.
Yeah, I'm learning the politics of that, and you think that's your big dream as a small company, like, okay, I want to be in the biggest store possible, but it's very political, and there's a lot of things I didn't know about. If you want to deal with the big boys, there's a lot of hard. Yeah, there's a lot of hard things to deal with. You have to be big enough to be able to. They want to return product at the end of the year. There's a lot of discounts. Some big companies pay for shelf life in these stores.
Yep.
Yeah,
it's not that realistic for an independent company, really.
It's not. And they have told me, some of the large ones have told me, we deal with 11 vendors, and the chances of you being the 12th are not really in the cards. Like, they'll just tell you. And
okay, then.
I'm like, okay, I've been bothering you for a year and a half. Now I get it.
maybe you could have said something, I don't know, a year and a quarter ago.
Right. And I'm like, well, that's fine, because I'm in the soulful mom and pop stores. So and
it gives you more creative license, I think, in a lot of ways. You inspire so many people to be creative. What's inspiring you these days? Are there any street artists or anything particularly in pop culture, or speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, luckily I'm continually inspired. I get a lot of inspiration when I go to a museum, or if I go out in nature. This week in New York are all these art fairs where galleries from around the world come and make a big show of their art that they represent. So I'll go look at current trends in art and people's just amazing talents, and look at the motifs in paintings. So that was the last 2 days I've been doing that. So that's been my latest.
Yeah.
I went to Paris last year for an event, and I just tried to go to every museum I could, and churches, and look at the motifs that are all through the Louvre, through the cathedrals, ancient stenciling on walls that are covered in age. I was just so inspired.
Are you sketching? Are you taking pictures with your phone? How are you?
Photos. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then I'll go home and sketch, like, oh, I saw this motif, and that could become a pattern. I went to the Decorative Arts Museum in Paris. Took a lot of pictures outside as well. It could be a simple walk down the street here, looking at. I'll take pictures of walls around Brooklyn that are maybe have graffiti on them or just are aged, or even what was I taking a picture the other day? There's some patterns on a manhole, and I was like, well, they kind of look like an African repeat pattern.
Mm-hmm.
So I shot that, and it was like a brown aged steel, and I was like, it kind of looks like it could be a brown wall. So just I guess because I'm a designer, my eye is out for that, but I do feed myself a lot. Travel is like my one, when I can afford it, it's my favorite thing to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you been able to find a balance between, creating and then running a creative business?
It's definitely two different things. And I don't like, I'm not born to do Excel and QuickBooks. I've learned it over the years, and to keep your nose in your books is important. And but with that said, I am still striving to grow my company where I'm not doing everything. Sometimes people think I'm bigger than I am, but I really do.
I mean, you travel with a posse now, so that could be part of it.
Yeah, we're a small team, but luckily my manufacturer does a lot for me as well.
Yeah.
But sure, I'd love to. The balance is, it's something you have to do if you're this small. But there's days where the design hat is on, and then there's days where I'm in QuickBooks filling out orders, or like picking out SKUs for a new product, and doing that stuff.
Is it hard for you to switch your brain from one side to the other? I mean, not figuratively. Those are such different spaces within.
Yeah, I'm going to be really honest that it is a buzzkill to do the business side of it.
Yeah.
Because there's days where I set out like, I'm going to paint and put up some posts with these new stencils to inspire people. And then, it's a blessing to get an order. So I'll get, I got a big order. Let me put that into QuickBooks and do my process. And then some more emails will come through that are business related. And I'm like,
but it interrupts your flow.
It sure does.
Yeah.
So I'm like, it's not a creative day today.
And then do you just honor that?
Yeah, because those things have to get done, and that's part of business. And then I'm like, well, it'll happen. And with that said, like, I can't force creativity some days. I can't.
Yeah.
If I'm not in the space, I won't be creative that day. Like,
and you can feel it, can't you? I can feel a change in. I don't know if it's energy. I can feel like the air feels different, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. When I know that I'm going to, be able to write or whatever. And I can tell sometimes when it's just not going to happen, and I can sit there and try and make it happen, but I might as well utilize that time for something else. Do you feel that at all?
Absolutely. Yeah. I feel it. I'm like, it's a creative day. I know what I'm going to do, and I won't check my computer for hours so I can do it because I'm in that mood.
Yeah.
But if I'm not, then I'll say, I should, and I'll say, I don't feel like it. I can't do that today.
Do you have any rituals that could help get you back into that space if you needed to be? Music or exercise or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Definitely several. I'm like a ritual person. I have to exercise. I get all my ideas on on the treadmill. Or the elliptical or something, like so many. If I'm like, I feel a little stagnant, I'll go do cardio. I'll move around. I'll go for a walk. I think blood movement, it's like super, like just a chemical, physical thing, is to just get yourself moving. Yeah. So for me, if I break a sweat, like all these ideas will come. So that's one. If I'm feeling overwhelmed, I'll meditate to kind of just ground myself. If you feel overwhelmed and you have a list, and business stuff is weighing you down, I just I think of myself as a computer restarting, and I'll take a meditation break, or even I'll if my assistants are in here, I'll take a 10-minute nap, and I really think it's the equivalent of restarting your computer. Like, you just shut down and you restart, and you're like, okay,
Are you able to fall asleep that fast?
Yeah, I take I can take like a 10 to 20 minute nap, and I'll feel like I took an hour's sleep at least. That's
magnificent.
Yeah, I love it.
That is a gift, friend.
Yeah, it's like a need though. But it doesn't happen often. But when I can do it, if I'm feeling overwhelmed or something, I'm like, let me do my siesta.
Yeah.
And it's a small thing. And, people say, oh, that sounds like a luxury. Really? It's 10 minutes, so.
Yeah. I mean, you can click through Facebook for, 60 minutes and not get that same, productivity back.
Right.
And I think that's so important to honor, that's sort of like the biology taking over. Like, your body is very adept at telling you when it needs something, and so listening to it really ultimately will help you creatively. It's just hard. It's hard when you keep hearing that bell go off, like from the emails.
Right. Well, there's no technology in my bedroom. That's another thing. I try to do. Yeah. But yeah, there are definitely, I try to keep a balance in a healthy life to make the business its best. Eat well, sleep well, give yourself a little break. And then I also, if I'm having a day where, it's just human and part of business, I guess, if you're feeling, business is, overwhelming me, or business is slow, or my mind is not exactly where I want it. Sometimes I will take that time to paint, just make a little something, and it somehow empowers you. You feel like when you make a little something, that you worked, you feel accomplished.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And I think, it's my hope that people who are listening to this podcast and making beautiful projects from your stencils, remember that sometimes in life, just making a little something can make a huge difference.
I love that. I hope by them having the stencils at their hand there, if they're, that it's, bringing them some part of happiness in the day. That would be, again, a great reward.
Well, Ed, thank you so much for being here with us today. It's been a pleasure.
Well, you're one of my favorite people, so thank you for having me.
Right back at you. Thanks, friend. Ed Roth's stencils, kits, and books can be found on the Stencil1 website. For more information, please check out this episode's show notes page at VickieHowell.com/craftish. Craftish is produced in Austin, Texas by me and mixed and edited by Dave Campbell. Thanks again to our sponsor, Brooklyn Craft Company. Even if you're not in Brooklyn, check out their website. They have tons of inspirational photos and just really cool stuff in general. And if you like this episode, please share it with friends and take a moment to give a rating or review on iTunes. We really appreciate it. If you're interested in learning more about my other projects, including my online courses, project tutorials, or my latest book, We Garter Stitch Must-Have Knits for Modern Babies and Toddlers, go to VickieHowell.com and follow @VickieHowell on social media. If you have a craft or creative business question, please join me on my weekly live video Q&As called Ask Me Monday. Those are on Facebook, and they go live at 10 a.m. Pacific Time, 1 p.m. Eastern, but if that timing doesn't work for you, they can also be watched anytime under the videos playlist. That's at facebook.com/VickieHowell. Tune into the next episode of Craftish with my guest artist and founder of Zelma Rose, Lisa Anderson Schaefer. That'll go live on Tuesday. Until next time, take time to revel in your craft, whatever it may be. Breathe in, craft out. Bye.